So, dear class, looking forwards a little now to our next reading, Shakespeare's Othello, for this weekend and the earlier part of next week, when there'll be another quiz coming your way on Wednesday. A few words about Othello, which I hope some of you have come across. One of Shakespeare's most famous plays, concerning, as it does, a man who manages to persuade himself, with the help of somebody who secretly hates him, manages to persuade himself that his wife is unfaithful, with fatal effects. Now, this man is a great warrior, a great general, a black mercenary, if you like, in the employ of Venice, one of the great powers in the Eastern Mediterranean, and without Othello's help they would not be the successful and powerful nation that they are. So they're greatly in his debt, which is important because at the very beginning of the play he makes off with the daughter of one of the grandees of Venice, who demands redress and brings the Senate together to demand an explanation of Othello, and he gives a very good one. Basically, the lady is in love with him, and he doesn't have to mention that were the Senate, the Venetian Senate, to punish him, they would be without a general in the coming wars, perhaps against the Turkish preparation, which is not a patent medicine, as it sounds like. It's the great fleet of the Turks, with whom the Venetians disputed the Eastern Mediterranean at the time. So, here is this story of poor Othello, who has believed absolutely in the purity of his wife, and is shocked to find some evidence produced by his own ancient is a rank in the army, somebody who is below the rank of lieutenant, a sergeant if you like, but somebody who Othello trusts, whose name is Iago, and he trusts Iago, who has fought at his side in many wars and battles, and yet Othello has made the terrible mistake of promoting another man whose knowledge of war is really out of books, a Florentine courtier, to be his lieutenant instead of promoting Iago. It's a fatal mistake. So now, immediately, I have to bring to your attention the issue surrounding Othello in the theatre, which has been that Othello for many generations, indeed for centuries, was always played by a white actor. And mercifully that's now impermissible, unthinkable in truth. It was not unthinkable when I was young, and the most atrocious arguments were put forward to justify this, aside from the fact that it's one of the great dramatic and tragic roles, so all the great white actors wanted to play it. And the argument was made that Othello, who is a Moor, that's to say, a Moorish man from Morocco, that Othello, if he is a Moor, as the title of the play, Othello the Moor of Venice, tells us, is not black. Moors, for the most part, really almost entirely, are not black. They're dusky, but they are not black. So this was always the excuse put forward by white actors and by productions featuring white actors as Othello. In fact, the play itself contradicts this, as if there were any need to seek for the absurdity of this. Othello says himself at one point, trying to understand where the problem would be in his beautiful young Venetian wife looking elsewhere for company. And he says, "Happily, for I am black." Perhaps because I'm black and have not those soft arts of conversation that courtiers like his newly promoted lieutenant has. And his ancient, his sergeant, manages to persuade poor Othello that it is this very lieutenant who, in effect, has taken Iago's job, that is having an affair with Othello's wife. And it's important to see from the very beginning the role that racism plays in this play, which traditionally was interpreted in order to try and keep race and racism at bay, was interpreted as being about a good man, Othello, a noble person, and a bad man, an evil man, Iago, and the demon, the green-eyed monster, jealousy. It's a play about jealousy and a play about what bad men can do to good men. In fact, this ignores the substance of the play. Here is a man, a great soldier, employed by a foreign nation, a famously cultivated nation, the Venetian nation, and who feels himself to be, though clearly their best general, nonetheless not as much at home in a sitting room, in a drawing room, as native-born Venetians. And now he's called upon to promote somebody to the rank of lieutenant. And here he makes his terrible mistake, hoping to show the Venetians that he has fully assimilated into their world, which really he knows is never going to be possible. As much as they need him and admire him, he will never be a Venetian. He will always be the Moor of Venice. But hoping basically hoping for their approval, he promotes a fancy courtier, actually from Florence, but the kind of promotion that a white general might make to the rank of lieutenant, instead of promoting Iago, his ancient, who is a more rough and ready person, but a real soldier. And in doing so, he makes the terrible error of currying favor with white society, and it is the error that costs him ultimately his life. So that is the real lesson in the play with regard to racism, that racism warps everybody's mind and soul, and even persuades people of great substance, great courage, and great experience of the world at large, like Othello, to make the mistake of seeking to insinuate himself, to ingratiate himself in the white world, instead of standing his ground and being who he is when this moment comes of electing, of setting, of choosing a promotion. And seen in that light, it has terrible resonances all across the history of humanity, no matter whether it is race as brutally defined as in this play, or whether it derives from my own Jewish forebears seeking to be accepted and acceptable, and ignoring so often the the things said behind their backs, as long as they could believe that they had made themselves acceptable to the world in which they found themselves. So keep sight of that as you read this extraordinary play, full of magnificent verse, extraordinary utterances. There's no doubt that Othello is conceived by Shakespeare as a man of great natural rhetoric, a beauty of rhetoric far exceeding anybody else in the play, a tone, a huge vocabulary, a rhythmic delivery which is his alone and his intrinsically. It is in him. And some of the things that he says, which I think I will want to mention in a video in a few days' time, have rung down the ages, as so much of Shakespeare's work has. And thank goodness we no longer have blackface on the stage generally or anywhere, so that shameful tradition has died the death, I'm delighted to say. And a few people who succumbed to it or partook of it in times past are now getting savaged for it. I feel a little sorry for some of them. They didn't think, they were thoughtless racists, which is no excuse, but they were. They were not the racists that we see around us so often today, who have no excuse of thoughtlessness, who know exactly what they're doing and saying, and do so deliberately, to hurt and to offend. So that has changed, and now we have had many wonderful actors playing Othello, and some in the past who were great black actors who were who white people allowed, God help us, to play Othello. So I hope you enjoy it. It's one of the perennial favorites of the stage, and you'll understand that theatre is a very selective medium, since few people buy plays just to read. The survival of a play is dependent on persuading an audience to pay money to sit down and watch it. What in Britain we call bums on seats, which does not mean indigent persons sitting down. What we call a bum is a tramp, although of course a tramp is another British word which has other connotations in American English. A bum is a homeless person. So, but the bums that theatres require on the seats of their theatres are not homeless and have enough cash in their pockets to pay for their seats. So plays have to keep earning and re-earning their keep. They can't become classics just read by students and read by fans of this author or that author. So the canon, if you like, the list of great plays is a short one. Plays appear and cling to their place on it for a while, and then drop off. And we see with the passage of time which plays truly earn their keep and earn their place in the Western tradition, in the theatre tradition of the West. And Othello is certainly one of those. So we will take next week to considering Antigone and Othello, two tragedies, and what it is that binds them to what we are going to try and summon up, the idea of a tradition, and specifically of a Western tradition. So we'll be thinking about that. Until then, please keep safe, keep dry. It's been very wet up here in the Catskill Mountains, and stay home if you can. Alright, bye bye my dears.